All right, so imagine this, Captain Nemo, but not like the mysterious kind of lone wolf guy we know from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. What if he was an Indian prince fighting against British colonialism?
Whoa, that's a pretty different picture.
Right, and that's exactly the premise of Prime Video's new series Nautilus.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So we're going to dive deep into the pilot called Evasion. See how they pull this off.
Sounds good. I'm curious to hear what they do with Nemo's backstory, especially considering most adaptations just completely ignore his origins.
You're totally right. Most people don't even realize that Jules Verne originally conceived him as an Indian prince, Prince Dakar, but this show brings it front and center.
Which makes sense given the setting they've chosen, 1857, right?
Yeah.
The British East India Company is at the height of its power, exploiting resources and people all across colonized nations.
Yeah, and it's right in the middle of all this that we meet Nemo.
Played by Shazad Latif.
Exactly. And he's just fantastic. Super charismatic, but with this, like, brooding intensity.
Yeah.
A natural leader, even though he's not the captain of the Nautilus just yet.
Oh, so where do we find him then?
He's actually a prisoner of the East India Company.
A prisoner?
Yeah, they're forcing him to build a Nautilus.
Wow, that's a clever twist. So how does he go from prisoner to, the captain we all know?
Well, let's just say he's not exactly the model prisoner. He's secretly leading a prisoner uprising.
Oh, wow.
He's using his knowledge of the Nautilus to plan this daring escape and ultimately strike back against the company.
So we're seeing Nemo as a freedom fighter right from the get-go. That's a far cry from the solitary, kind of enigmatic figure we're used to.
Definitely. It adds a whole new dimension to his character.
Yeah.
He's not just this, like, eccentric genius obsessed with the sea. He's driven by a deep resentment for the company, this burning desire for justice.
That's a really interesting take. So how does the show actually introduce the Nautilus itself? I mean, it's such a technological marvel, almost a character in its own right.
Visually, it's amazing.
I bet.
Especially the underwater scenes. It's like you really get a sense of its power and beauty.
But it's more than just spectacle, right?
Right. It's not just about looking cool. It symbolizes so many things, like Nemo's brilliance, but also the oppressive force of the company that made him build it.
A symbol of both imprisonment and the potential for freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of freedom, we got to talk about Humility Lucas. She's something else. A real force to be reckoned with.
Oh yeah, she's not your typical damsel in distress.
Not even close. Strong-willed, resourceful, constantly pushing back against how women were expected to behave in that time period.
Some reviewers are even comparing her to Elizabeth Swann from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely that independent spirit. There's more to humility than just that comparison. She's complex. She's got her own motivations.
Definitely agree. It feels like while there are those surface similarities, she really carves her own path. And you can tell she's not afraid to challenge Nemo.
Oh yeah, that dynamic between them is electric. There's tension, but also this undeniable chemistry.
I can only imagine. So, to recap, we have this reimagined Nemo leading our rebellion against a powerful empire. We got this captivating new character in Humility Lucas, and on top of that, stunning visuals. This is definitely shaping up to be more than just a simple retelling of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Way more. It's a fresh take, but it stays true to the spirit of adventure and exploration while adding all this historical context and political intrigue. And all that's just in the first episode.
It makes you wonder where they'll take it from here.
Okay, so I gotta ask, what stood out to you the most in this pilot episode? Was it Nemo's transformation, the introduction of humility, or something else entirely?
For me, it was how they recontextualized Nemo's anger. Like, in a lot of adaptations, he's this bitter recluse.
Yeah.
But here, we see the source of that bitterness, the injustice he suffered at the hands of the company. It makes him so much more sympathetic and compelling.
I totally get that. You really feel the weight of his past, how it fuels his desire for vengeance.
It's not just about escaping. It's about reclaiming his identity and fighting for what he believes in.
This is already shaping up to be a wild ride.
And we've only just dipped our toes in. There's so much more to explore.
All right, well, everyone stay tuned because we're just getting started. We'll be right back with part 2 of our deep dive into Nautilus. Welcome back to our deep dive into Nautilus.
One thing that really struck me, is how well the show balances this high stakes action.
Yeah.
With these quiet moments of character development.
Yeah, no, you're right. It'd be so easy to get swept up in the adventure and all the spectacle.
Totally.
But they actually take the time to explore the inner lives of these characters.
Especially Nemo and Humility.
Definitely, yeah.
What about the other characters, though, the supporting cast? We kind of touched on them in part 1, but I want to dig a little deeper.
Sure, yeah.
How do they shape the story? Well, like, take Gustave Benoit, for instance. He's a fascinating counterpoint to Nemo, you know?
Yeah.
Nemo is so driven by revenge.
Right.
But Gustave, he's like the voice of reason. He's always urging caution, trying to encourage diplomacy.
So he's not just there to be the, like, good guy.
No, not at all.
There's more to him.
Much more, yeah. He's a man of science, right?
Right.
But he's also got this deep empathy. You know, he gets the plight of the colonized people.
Mm-hmm.
But he also sees how easily violence can escalate.
Yeah.
So his presence on the Nautilus creates this constant tension. It's like a moral tug of war, you know?
Between idealism and pragmatism.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like he represents almost like the other side of Nemo's internal struggle.
Oh, interesting.
That part of him that wants to find a peaceful solution.
Right. So it makes their dynamic really interesting to watch.
Definitely. And it's not just about them, you know? The whole supporting cast, even the characters who might seem kind of minor at first, they all add to the richness of the story.
Yeah, I can see that.
Every character, you know, from the loyal crew members to those ruthless agents of the East India Company, they all fit into this tapestry of rebellion and resistance.
So where does humility fit into all of this? We talked about her strength, her independence, but what about her role in the larger conflict?
Well, her very presence on the Nautilus, it disrupts the established order. You know, she
Right.
challenges Nemo's authority, not out of spite or anything,
Right.
but out of this deep sense of justice. She sees the hypocrisy of a man fighting for freedom, but still holding on to those traditional hierarchies.
That's a great point. It adds another layer to their dynamic. It's not just romantic tension. It's a clash of ideologies.
Yeah, exactly. And that clash, that friction, it's what makes their relationship so captivating. They're always pushing each other to grow, you know?
To confront their own biases.
To see the world from different perspectives.
So we're talking about way more than just an adventure story here.
For sure.
It's exploring colonialism, identity, the struggle for freedom.
Absolutely. And it does it all without sacrificing any of the thrill, any of the excitement that you'd expect from a story like this.
Yeah.
I mean, the action's breathtaking, the underwater scenes are stunning, and pace never slows down.
But how do they manage to weave all these historical and political elements in without it becoming overwhelming?
Balance, I think.
Okay.
The historical context is like a backdrop, but it never overshadows the characters or their own personal journeys.
I see.
They use these events, you know, historical figures, as a springboard to explore these universal themes that resonate with audiences today.
So it's not just a history lesson.
No.
It's about people.
It's about their relationships, their struggles, and by grounding those struggles in a specific time and place, it adds this layer of depth of relevance.
It makes you think, right, about the impact of colonialism, how it still shapes our world today.
Exactly, yeah. It's a reminder that the fight for freedom and justice, it's ongoing, a struggle that's been fought for centuries. And by seeing Nemo's story through this lens, Nautilus invites us to connect with that struggle on a personal level.
And they're doing all this while still being incredibly entertaining,
Right.
you know, making an engaging show.
It really speaks to the power of storytelling. When it's done right, a story can transport you, challenge your perspective, make you feel connected to characters who might seem totally different from yourself.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, I have to ask, what about the East India Company? What stood out to you about how they were depicted in the show?
You know, I was really fascinated by how they humanized even the people who worked for the company,
Okay.
even the ones who did terrible things.
Right.
They didn't shy away from the brutality of colonialism, but they also explored the motivations, like even the justifications of the people perpetrating it.
It's complicated.
It is, yeah. It reminded me that history is rarely black and white. Even the villains, right? In their own minds, they often believe they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's a powerful insight. It forces us to really think about the complexities of history. That even those we might consider evil, they have their own belief, their own experiences that are driving them.
Exactly. And by exploring that, you know, those complexities, Nautilus challenges us to think critically about the past, to recognize the human cost of colonialism.
Well said. And on that note, I think we're ready to move on to our final part. We'll explore the lasting impact of Nautilus, how it might even reshape our understanding of this literary icon. Stick with us. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So as we kind of wrap up our exploration of Nautilus, I'm really curious to hear your overall thoughts. Do you think it truly succeeds in reimagining this classic story, making it relevant for today's audience?
I think it does, yeah, brilliantly, actually. By rooting Nemo's story in that historical context, you know, British colonialism, it adds so many layers, makes it resonate in a way that, speaks to modern viewers.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about Nemo, about humility, but I got to say, the way Nautilus portrays the Nautilus itself, fascinating.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's such an iconic vessel, but they give it this whole new perspective.
Absolutely. It becomes so much more than just a submarine. It's a symbol of Nemo's brilliance, but also, his imprisonment and ultimately his fight for freedom. And visually, they capture that like awe and wonder of this incredible piece of technology, but they also don't shy away from the darker side of how it was created. The forced labor, the exploitation.
It's a good reminder that even amazing inventions can come from a place of oppression. And it's interesting how they contrast the Nautilus with the the grandeur of the British Empire.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have this cutting-edge technology.
Right.
But on the other, there's these rigid traditions, the hierarchies of colonial rule.
It's like this clash,
Yeah.
between progress and tradition, between freedom and control.
Yeah, it really underscores the idea that real progress can't come from oppression.
Yeah.
It's like Nemo's rebellion is against more than just one empire. It's like he's fighting against a whole way of thinking, this idea that one nation can just dominate another.
Yeah, that's what makes his story so relevant today. Like, we're still grappling with colonialism. The fight for social justice is happening all over the world.
And Nautilus, it invites us to look at history differently, to examine how these power dynamics, they still shape our world.
I think that's a great point. Yeah.
It's a lot to think about.
For sure.
But they make it like they manage to explore all this while keeping it exciting, keeping you on the edge of your seat. It never feels preachy or anything.
No. It's all in the storytelling. They've got this compelling narrative, complex characters, thrilling action. It just draws you in.
Yeah.
And then through that, that immersive experience, they subtly weave in these deeper themes, these ideas.
Proof that good storytelling can entertain and educate at the same time.
I totally agree. And I think Nautilus nails it on both fronts. It's a fun, exciting adventure, but it also makes you think about the world, your place in it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from Nautilus?
I'd say watch it with an open mind. Be willing to challenge your own assumptions about, what this story is. Don't just see it as a rehash of the classic tale.
Right.
Look for those deeper layers of meaning, the historical context, the nuances of the characters. That's what makes it so compelling.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Nautilus.
It was my pleasure. And to everyone listening, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving into those depths of knowledge and imagination.